my distinguished colleagues, our hosts. Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity to be here among our Hungarian friends. We have some problems with you recently, but this is just, not so difficult not to overcome. I have a special soft spot for Hungary, and especially for Hungarian culture. Not only because, of course, Sándor Márai, who is actually a hero of everyone, but also for Thomas Molnár. Probably the young generation has never heard that name. Thomas Molnár was a conservative Hungarian emigre who was actually writing all his life and working in California. I met him over there, and he came to Budapest to die here in the 90s, and I had a chance at the last moment still to meet him. A great man. But my colleague with whom I was just also collaborating was Georgi Schöpflin, who was a member of the European Parliament. I'm sorry, I probably didn't just pronounce that name right. And he invited me a couple of times to the Danube Institute over here, and that was really a great experience. Let me say something like that. History of Hungary, as we may add also of Poland, as one Hungarian historian said, is a string of victories in defeats. And this is also going to be this time. The crisis of the European Union is profound because it's essentially not at the political or legal level. It's at the fundamentally cultural level or mentality level. A great Polish politician and historian of the Polish uprisings of 1830, Maurycy Mochnacki, said, "No one was in the right because everybody was weak." The key to the success of Poland and Hungary and East Central Europe, also that part of Europe, which is actually not yet the part of the European Union, is essentially to be strong in economic sense and to be strong in terms of bringing up elites which are essentially realizing that they are representing the richness of Europe through the richness of their own cultures. And that, of course, is a big problem today because we have a situation which is actually the universal situation in which a large part of the so-called liberal elites essentially ceased to be loyal to their own countries in Europe and began to be orienting themselves toward the global market, the ideological global market, the economic global market, and the European Union is part of that global project. That is something which should be just said at the beginning. I'm not talking about the Maastricht Treaty. I'm not talking about the legal intricacies which Madam Minister was so brilliantly exposing, because it seems to me that this is just a dialogue of the depths. In other words, this is not anymore about law. This is not about anymore about treaties, which in a large part of the Polish elites are today, which are not actually intoxicated by the European project from the ideological point of view, considered to be dead, or at least just violated beyond any recognition. We are talking about a certain particular aim, which actually oriented our exit from communism. We exited from communism because essentially we wanted to be part of Europe, which we had been for over 1,000 years. We are the longest nations and the most profoundly rooted in the European faith, which is common to all of us nations. And we actually exited communism because we wanted to be escaping from irrationality of the East. Irrationality, economic, of course, political repression, recovery of our history, and joining that Europe, which seemed to us to be kind of a dream or kind of a project which was going actually to be realized with all freedom and equality. And to put it in a more symbolic forms, we wanted to join Europe of Schuman, Adenauer, de Gasperi, the Europe of natural law, which was violated both by the German Nazism and the communists. We were rebelling against that particular persecution in the name of that natural law. Solidarity movement was actually out of that. John Paul II, which gave a certain sense of unity and proudness to the European Union of the eastern part, I'm sorry, to the eastern people, was actually out of that tradition. And that was something which actually oriented our aim. And suddenly we realized that Europe was not there. That essentially Europe was not only a political and economic project, which was actually something which we wanted to participate in, but it became an ideological project. And that ideological project was something which actually was a shock, which at the very beginning was not understood, but very soon had to be actually defined, and very soon it had to be somehow dealt with. Because to say it very simple, Europe, or the European project, at the moment we signed the Maastricht Treaty, or just we entered Europe, was already kind of a messianistic project. It was a project which was to neutralize people's will, even if it constantly referred to that. The aim was, of course, the ever closer union, but unification or federalization was essentially based on the clear understanding that peoples could not participate in that peoples were too stupid, that people were actually detrimental to that great project which the European Union's elites conceived for the European Union in the future. That is why the democratic deficit of the European Union is not actually the deficit the European elites wants to rectify. It's essentially a sine qua non condition of essentially realizing that messianistic project. And that is why, of course, we were not aware at the very beginning, as all the nations in East Central Europe, that we are entering the area of thinking and the area of political projects which were not corresponding exactly what we expected from Europe. The other thing was that essentially the German experience. I'm surprised that so far, actually, the name Germany was not actually brought up over here. The German experience was here a very, very crucial one, and to a large extent, very detrimental one, even if against the wills. Germany based its role in Europe on escape from history. In other words, they could not really go into any European, into any positive side of their history. They were so compromised that they had essentially to redefine themselves anew. And they redefined themselves anew as the nation which was going actually to unite Europe and to create themselves as a moral model, and also the model which would be basing its loyalty to Europe on the so-called constitutional patriotism. In other words, whatever was there in history was essentially nothing, was to be escaped. When you go to the Museum of European History in Brussels, if someone remembers communism, it's a horror. I mean, I was thinking that I am experiencing a déjà vu of the communist propaganda, this time in the garb, of course, of the European values. In other words, we were living in the hell of the European history, including Christianity, including, of course, all kinds of historical events. And now we are in the European Union, and this is a paradise. And the paradise is symbolized by the abortion scissors. That was something which actually shocked me, as something which actually I couldn't actually understand. There was not even a sign of showing that great legacy, the great heritage of Europe, which would contribute something actually positive to that project which was today being actually built. But if that was actually the project, that meant that the Eastern European part of the continent, 100 billion people, and very strong right now, even if they don't know about that, that part was essentially there for education. That part was essentially over there to be treated as a kind of pupils to be brought up before they become fully Europeans. And that was something which, of course, the rebellious Poles sooner or later couldn't stand. Or, as one Hungarian intellectual said, probably I think it was Georgi Konrad, I had to actually verify that, before I was a bad communist, now I'm a bad European. In other words, now, from now on, I have to be just, educated properly because I can go to the European market. So a great task of education East Central Europe and Eastern European people began. And that particular attitude, of course, was somehow not noticed for a very simple sense. That rationality, economic rationality and political opening brought spectacular results. Poland is right now the fastest developing country in economic terms in the world next to Vietnam. It is right now on a higher level of development than Portugal, Spain, Greece, southern Italy, and very soon is going actually to be even higher. And the problem is, are we allowed, including of course Hungary and other Eastern European countries, to progress along this line? In other words, to catch up and to level our fate, economic and political, with the rest of Europe? Or are we going to be treated as a kind of a neo-colonial ramp of the European Union, so to fulfill the aims of those the strongest? Yes. My favorite, Germany. Yeah. Brexit was, of course, misfortune from the point of view of Poland, Hungary, East Central Europe. But for Germany, it was a miracle. They wanted it to leave because there would be no anchor anymore to essentially limit the imperial ambitions. And once they had a free, actually, road to that particular messianistic project along the image of it, with the Eastern European project to be kind of a neo-colonial subordinate part, then, of course, real problems began. And in this particular, of course, perspective, the European Union law turned out to be a tool of justification and creation of institutions and social rules, legitimized only if they supported this messianistic project. Formal law was shaped actually according to that. As the Bishop of Hoadley said to the English king in 1717, whoever has a right of interpretation of the law has a right to actually legislate. And that's exactly what the European Union Tribunal of Justice is doing. It's a natural glue and substitute of this messianistic constitutionalism. Its role is to shape the treaties in a proper and the only proper way. There's a lack of demos in the European integration because essentially there's no European people. There are great family of the European peoples with great histories, which actually are cooperating and are very cooperating, and this is just very successful. When we were entering the European Union, well, fine, Germany was the strongest. Let's say we will have Germany as Herbert von Karajan, just directing the great orchestra of the great European nations and all together. And what we got? We got the Prussian general with the LGBT logo on the Pickelhaube. So that's the Polish perspective. And one part of that particular project and neutralization of law and neutralization of those nations in East Central Europe was essentially the language of morality. In other words, morality turned out to be a substitute of law. That morality is based on the so-called European values. Morality was based on the certain understanding, reshaping of the liberalism and liberal democracy with a particular anthropological new understanding of a human being. If we do not understand that particular dimension, what happened with the concept of the human right, and what happened with the definition of a human, we'll not be able essentially to understand what is the cultural problem of the European Union today. If, for instance, Chantal Mouffe, the Belgian feminist said in 1990. After the liberation, I quote, after the liberation from communism, we have a gigantic task, that is in the West, toward the societies of East Central Europe, which has to be liberated from oppressions of nation-state, religion, family, and other ossified traditional structures which block their way to the true European future. In other words, what it meant was that she wanted to destroy all which gave us meaning and essentially emancipate us from all the institutions into an abstract European citizen operating according to the European values and rights. But humans can be actually wronged in many, many much more profound ways than by violating of their rights. In other words, it can be wronged by the destruction of relations, by the destructions of communities which gave us sense, by the destructions of all those institutions which are not based on the exchange of rights, but they are essentially based on a certain particular devotion to a value which extends beyond our focus on rights. Destruction of family, destruction of children's innocence by this aggressive sexual revolution program which the European Union actually considers to be the sine qua non of transforming Europe. By the way, when I hear, I'm very sorry, Professor, because you are a member of the European Parliament, but in a large part is a ridiculous institution. It's the institutions with all those intoxicated ideologically passionarias. Well, I don't know what you mean by what you know what I mean by that. But anyway, defining Poland as homophobic land, unlike Germany, England, the United States, until 80s, Poland has never had any legal persecution of homosexuals. Never. It was a private matter. So what? I mean, just, that's not the public ideas. And suddenly, of course, that was considered. Why was it so? Because Poland has a particular problem, which Hungary probably does not. In other words, Poland has the liberal left elite of largely, but not only, post-communist stock, which considers the European Union project as the much better realization of the communist project of the transformation of man in a much more sophisticated and much less and so obvious brutal way. So they not only escaped from Polish possible retribution to the protection of that liberal left elite in Europe, but also they said, okay, now with the help of the European Union institutions, we are going to essentially transform that recalcitrant, nationalistic, xenophobic, homophobic, blah, 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 people into the proper European nation. And something had to go. In other words, that particular project had, at a certain point, hit the wall. And hit the wall, and the catalyst for that was that 2015 immigration crisis. Suddenly, it was so blatantly anti-law of the European cities. Suddenly, it was so blatantly will of one nation and one woman to essentially treat Europe as a kind of open immigration space. How could such a crazy project be actually even conceived of? Poland has, until then, accepted over 2 million Ukrainians. Poland has accepted the largest number of Ukrainians and all persecuted people, Chechens, 100,000 Chechens. No mention of that. We have accommodated all these people, not in camps, but in private homes. They were integrated our own society as truly persecuted. But that particular mixture of immigration with actually refugees was a corruption of language. Moreover, that enormous NGOs, idiotic organizations, which actually collaborate with the huge criminal smugglers, this total lack of essentially decoupling morality from politics, all that created that particular craziness. That craziness had a deeper root. That craziness had a deeper root in the guilt of Western Europe for the colonial past. We were so guilty of persecuting these people from all those particular countries which are right now poor, that essentially we have a right to accept them all. And they cannot be at all demanded a certain activity, because since we were morally bad, they are morally pure. So we cannot really demand anything from them. We cannot demand from them just, to honor our societies, our values, and to integrate. We don't have any problems with immigrants. So that particular problem was just kind of a catalyst. And to sum up, I don't really want just to bore you to death. What is the aim of our countries, essentially, in relation to the European Union? Poland is overwhelmingly, 95% of the society, pro-European Union, pro-great united Europe. But at the same time, two recent surveys actually showed that the majority of the people consider the European Union to be a detrimental project to the Polish economic development. In other words, that this is a dysfunctional structure, and that dysfunctional structure has an intentional and also unintentional dimension. And the second thing, much more striking, there is life outside of the European Union. In other words, great that the European Union exists. It would be great if it could just, develop. But it's not the end of the world, and it's not the end of the European politics, it's not the end of the European history. And of course, right now, the situation is that Poland is so blatantly attacked by the European establishment because essentially it is much more dangerous to that particular messianistic project and the ideological project than Hungary, with all due respect. Hungary can actually do all kinds of crazy things, and it's on the side. But Poland can move Europe, can move essentially the European Union project in the right direction, can inspire Spain, can inspire Italy, can inspire also Germany, which can go any direction, God forbid, because it's not as actually calm and quiet as it used to be for years. So to conclude, we are at the crossroads, but we have in East Central Europe grown up. In other words, this is something which is a shock for the Western European elites. The East Central European peoples, nations, well, I think it's not forbidden word in the European Union by law and by the European values, want to be part of great Europe, equal Europe, which cultivates its own traditions, which cultivates its own values, which are open to all. And the Ukrainian war gave enormous opening for that. In Hungary, it is not truly understood. You are on this part different. But in Poland, it's not about Ukraine. Of course, we supported Ukraine from the very beginning. We accepted within the several months 4.5 million people to our homes. We gave, in 3 days after the invasion, 200 tanks immediately sent without any just, rules and any treaties, which saved Ukraine at this moment. We wish Ukraine to be actually the free, independent country and in the future actually part of the European Union, which is actually in the hands to do. But the Ukraine war is essentially destroying one particular axis, which was deadly for the European Union in terms of the in terms of pressing East Central European countries into no man's land in the European Union, the German-Russian cooperation. In other words, that was the axis to Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, which essentially cut off the Eastern Central European project from the economic ability to direct our economic development. And if this particular axis will be broken for good, which I'm not quite sure, then, of course, there is a new chance for the European Union and for the Eastern European countries. In Poland, among the young people, because that's what counts, the European Union is treated as a kind of good organization. Western Europe is treated as kind of equal part of Europe of which we have been part. Who wants to be as dysfunctional as, for instance, great quarters of the Western European towns with immigrants living in separated places? Who wants to essentially include that type of disintegration of social structures over the and so on and so on? In other words, we consider ourselves already, I'm talking about the young generation, without no complexes. And that's, of course, something which is very promising. I'm the old generation, not that old, but old. Essentially, I want to consume, but it's up to you to make this great project essentially livable and for the people and not for the ideologues which actually they have made it of. Thank you very much.